Hello, friends. Let's talk about our justice system with Dr. JP today. Hello, sir.
Hello, Ankit.
Sir, a disturbing case has come to our attention. Last week, a married man committed suicide. He claimed that he was under harassment by the local courts in a false dowry case, and he wrote a 24 or 25 page letter on the issue, and he said the last words that he said was justice is due. Now, there have been multiple issues in this case. The first definitely is the misuse of the Section 498A of the IPC. What are your thoughts on that, sir?
No, we don't know the facts and circumstances in this case. I'm sure both the parties have their own stories to tell. So it's not proper for me to take a position without knowing the facts.
Right.
So without going into the merits of this particular case or what happened, there are three fundamental problems in issues like this. The first is well-meaning legislation, absolutely necessary to protect women who are vulnerable in our society throughout history, or in case of Protection of Civil Rights Act, certain castes which are stigmatized, which are vilified, which are treated as untouchables, etc. The laws are necessary. There is a social consensus in the country, there is a judicial consensus, there is a political consensus. As a result, we have enacted these laws and provided also constitutional provisions. But unfortunately, in the absence of adequate safeguards, particularly in the absence of rule of law in this country, this also could become the source of extortion, corruption, and harassment.
Right.
For instance, the moment somebody files an FIR, in many such cases, the complaint is that the police habitually arrest without even doing preliminary inquiry, without even prima facie evidence. So you can't simply limit it to a particular incident. The larger legal framework, where the laws meant to protect certain vulnerable sections are on occasion abused, it's causing immense damage to society. Not only injustice to the aggrieved in a certain case, but it's actually hurting the sections which the society wanted to protect. If you abuse Protection of Civil Rights Act, after some time it loses the sharpness.
Right.
People will not trust the application of that law. They think it is applied in a mala fide way. If you abuse 498A or Dowry Prohibition Act, under both Dowry Prohibition Act and the Protection of Civil Rights Act, the burden of proof is now shifted to the accused. So, read with that 498A and shifting the burden of proof to the accused automatically means unless there is a fair process, there will be tremendous harassment in a country where rule of law is at a premium.
Right.
Unfortunately, our police and our judiciary on occasion face serious accusations of extortion and corruption. Now, unless we set our house in order by a very effective justice system, criminal justice system, accountable, effective, and independent justice, crime investigation being independent and accountable, and two, prosecutors being strong, accountable, and effective, and three, the judiciary being totally above the pale in terms of appointment, accountability, and removal, so on and so forth. Four, judicial procedures being made citizen-friendly, user-friendly, and very swift justice is possible. And five, dependence on forensics rather than extortion of money or harassment of the witnesses or sometimes third degree of the accused or whatever, and then extracting confessions, that must give way to scientific investigation. So that's the second broad issue. One is the law itself, in the absence of proper safeguards. The second is, how do you build the safeguards? The third is, in many cases like family disputes, it is best that there is either a conciliatory mechanism to start with as a first point of departure, and or a local court system whereby very speedy and effective justice is administered through summary procedures with the provision for appeal,
Right.
with recourse to lawyers. But we cannot simply have every case taking years and years. No, a civil case like this, or a civil case converted into criminal case like divorce. Divorce is a civil case. And the moment the harassment is alleged, it becomes a criminal case.
Absolutely.
Now, it takes 10, 15, 20 years. What happens to the two lives? And the children, if there are children? You can't keep these cases pending for 10, 15 years. And you can't keep them under duress. No, if you marry, ideally in India, we expect marriage to be for life. The parents want it, society wants it, and I presume the couple also wants it at the time of marriage. But we live in a modern era. Sometimes there may be irreconcilable differences. So if they want to separate, it's not a great sin. And unless we create a mechanism which makes it easy for them to part amicably as friends and protecting their rights, and swiftly, their lives are ruined. So we have to have swift mechanism. And that's the reason why Parliament enacted a law on local courts. They call it the Gram Nyayas Act. In my judgment, they should extend it to urban areas because most of the challenges of this kind are urban, and make sure that they're actually appointed, these courts, because the law made sure, Lok Sabha was very much behind the advocacy of that law. It is in line with the Law Commission recommendations, the Gram Nyayas Act. The law made sure that the procedures are summary, but the courts function entirely under Article 235 under the jurisdiction of the High Court. High Court appoints them, High Court holds them to account, High Court removes them. So they are judicial courts within the ambit of independent judicial system. But with summary procedures, provision for a lawyer being present, and quick disposal, and with the provision for appeal. So all interests are protected. But we must utilize the legal provisions existing in the country. On the one hand, we don't have enough laws to address these challenges. On the other hand, when the laws are made, we ignore them with impunity. So I think unless we look at it holistically, what we see in one case, a tragedy or something that captured the imagination of many people, is not an isolated case. There could be tens of thousands of such cases where people are hurt unnecessarily. Right. And certainly in all this, in this particular case, apparently the allegations of corruption, that there are allegations of serious corruption even against judiciary and police forces is a very sad thing, because the most sacred function of the state is rule of law.
Right.
If in administration of rule of law there is extortion, there is harassment, there is third degree, and there is corruption, then all liberty is at stake. I think the political system and judiciary must take it extremely seriously.
Right, sir. Speaking of delayed justice, there are about 5 crore plus pending cases in the total judiciary.
An unbelievably large number. I don't think any other country has even 1/3 of the number pending in the world.
And 80 to 90% of the cases are at the lower judiciary, not at the higher judiciary of the Supreme Court.
Because, in fact, the fact that Supreme Court is hearing tens of thousands of cases itself is a tragedy in my view. A constitutional court, the highest court of appeal, is now reduced to a trial court status. First of all, Supreme Court must limit its jurisdiction. Take the United States Supreme Court.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, typically only about 100 cases are chosen every year. Among the number of petitions filed, the court decides which really deserve or merit their attention at that level. If some other cases don't get their time, so be it. Heavens do not fall, because it's a constitutional court, the highest court of appeal. This indiscriminate thing, every citizen must go and they can file a petition, and however small the case is, the court shall hear. In my judgment, it's a very flawed argument. A trial court should hear. An appellate court should hear. A constitutional court cannot hear every case of individual grievance unless it's a constitutional matter or a matter of gravity, such gravity that the highest appellate court of the country, the Supreme Court of India, must actually exercise appellate jurisdiction. We made a mockery of these higher constitutional courts, so let's leave that aside.
Yes.
By definition, pendency is in trial courts. It should
Absolutely. That's what I was asking.
Unfortunately, high courts also, hundreds of thousands of cases pending there. So let's leave that aside. And among the cases pending, world over, typically, the civil cases filed or pending, they far outnumber the criminal cases. Because in an expanding economy in the modern era, with increasing economic transactions, after all, what is economic transaction? Between two individuals, there's a contract.
Right.
And therefore, there's a breach of contract, some other civil liability, some other dispute about property, about money, about other things. It's inevitable because economies have expanded all over the world. Hundreds, hundreds of times in the last 100, 200 years. Therefore, the civil cases far outnumber criminal cases. India is the only significant country where criminal cases are more than double that of the civil cases. Now, it doesn't mean that the crimes are more in India. Actually, India does not have much crime.
Okay.
If you take serious crime per unit population, we are still one of the lowest in the world. For a country where there's hardly any rule of law in reality, where the police forces are inadequate, where governance is generally in shambles, we are amazingly peaceful as a society because of the societal strength. So it's not that the criminal cases are large in number, it's that civil cases don't even go to courts. Criminal case, by and large, is registered. Maybe some cases here and there are suppressed, but almost every crime is registered. Therefore, you cannot conceal them. Civil cases, only if a party goes to court, that means not only do you suffer injustice in your judgment, but you feel that by going to court, you'll get justice. So once you don't have faith of getting justice by going to court, you don't even bother to go to court. Either you swallow injustice and suffer silently. That's what most people do most of the time. Even you and I would advise a friend or somebody who asked for advice. We would say, just there's no point going to court. You'll only spend more money. There's more heartburn. Just ignore it. Or go to a policeman and bribe him to get some rough and ready justice. Or go to a Gunda and bribe him. Rough and ready justice through brutal methods. And the Gunda ends up being an influential man in society, then becomes a caste leader, eventually an influential politician. There is a sequence. So judicial failure or justice failure has been a tremendous cause of decline in society, in politics, increasing corruption, and general mistrust of the Indian state and the justice system. So we have to take it extremely seriously.
So how do we tackle the large pendency of cases?
There are several things. There are 5 broad things. You have to really make prosecution truly independent and effective and accountable. If rendering justice, appreciation of evidence, that's what rendering justice is, and then deciding where justice lies, that is independent, right? There's no political process, executive branch cannot interfere. Then if rendering justice by appreciating evidence has to be independent, we all acknowledge, how is gathering evidence supposed to be political? If I gather evidence in a partisan manner, in an unjust manner, in a corrupt manner, how can justice be rendered? So it follows automatically that crime investigation too must be independent but accountable.
Right.
There are very complex mechanisms. For instance, I saw in the state of New South Wales in Australia, when we went there as a part of the Administrative Reforms Commission, a very complex hierarchy of institutions to protect the independence of the investigative system and yet make it very effective and accountable. So there are ways of doing it, but you must have independent and accountable justice system. The second is you must provide them adequate resources, personnel, training, technology, forensics most of all. You know, even very widely known cases in the national capital, the DNA analysis, the cases which took 1 year, 2 years, 3 years.
Right.
In all of India, we do DNA analysis only in a few thousand cases, maybe a few hundred cases. Typically, in one case, there will be 7 or 8 samples where DNA analysis is done. So only about 7,000-8,000 samples we do in the country. It's absurd. It simply is inadequate. Your forensic infrastructure. The third is procedures. Recently, the Parliament enacted 3 procedural laws.
Right.
The Criminal Procedure Code, the IPC, and the Evidence Act. I think a priceless opportunity was not adequately utilized. If you take criminal justice system, Justice Vajpayee government appointed a committee called Malimat Committee, headed by a former Chief Justice of Karnataka High Court, Justice Malimat. It's a very lucid report. All the experts, the jurists, the judges, lawyers and police officials and others, experts sat there. And it's one of the most lucid reports ever by Vajpayee government, the same India government earlier. And I don't think these criminal laws amendments have been influenced or informed by that kind of a report. So an exercise is wasted. It's never too late. Even now, we should go into that and see that criminal justice system is cleaned up procedurally. Then the fourth thing is the judiciary itself. In a country where competent lawyers are highly priced, there is not much of a demand to be judges. Unless you improve the quality of judges that are recruited. And that means standards of judicial recruitment. That means in Indian judicial service, the Constitution mentions it. Indian judicial service is one of the possible services to be created in the country, whereby the sheer competition for an all India service brings in quality, hopefully. Somehow we must change the pattern of recruitment of subordinate judiciary. And if you bring in Indian judicial service, it also helps you as a recruiting ground for the higher courts. Because they cannot come in unless they're at a district judges level. So we can have mechanisms by which they serve some years of probation, then become district judges, then become recruiting grounds for the high court judges. But we're required to bring competence into justice system. And finally, we have to see, as far as practicable, local courts take care of a large number of simple cases. 80% of all these 5.5 crore cases of litigation, civil or criminal, 80% are simple cases. Now, by not addressing them quickly and locally, you're clogging the system. The numbers are growing. Not too long ago, when Lok Sabha was founded, a generation ago, we used to talk about 2.5 crore cases pending in the country. We say how terrible it is, world's largest number, how bad it is. Today it's 5 crores. Every year we're probably adding another 30, 40 lakhs to pendency. It simply is not right. It simply is not right. We have to ensure speedy and effective justice. That's the hallmark of a civilized state. In the absence of that, economy is suffering. What people are not realizing is you cannot have economic growth if people don't trust rule of law. If I acquire, after enormous risks, some fortune, legitimately by competing in the market, if I'm not sure that my property or my productive unit or my money cannot be taken away with impunity, why will I risk it? Entrepreneurship involves risk-taking. Risk-taking involves a certain amount of security that after all the risk, whatever I get as a reward will be with me. Nobody will steal it, nobody will browbeat me out of it, nobody will rob it, and I have the protection of the state. Right now we don't have it in our country.
Right.
And of course, the other consequence is political. It's the criminals who are undeclared judges in the country. There's a market demand for criminals in this country. If criminals are not there, we'll invent criminals in order to serve many functions that states should be serving. And then they're becoming the state. They're entering politics. Now we are addressing the symptoms, saying, my God, there are so many criminals in politics. First of all, why are the criminals so popular? Because the society system has undeclared judges, rendering rough and ready justice through brutal means often. Second, why are they entering politics? Because they control crime investigation the moment they are in politics. So it makes abundant sense for a criminal to enter politics if you want to protect your criminal empire and to punish your opponents. Then why are the parties nominating criminals as candidates? Parties are not rogues. Parties are not bad. Because in our electoral system, the fellows with a lot of money power, muscle and organizational power, and caste power are more likely to be elected. By definition, criminal gangs have money and muscle. And there's no criminal gang that became political without a caste tag. On occasion, religious tag, but mostly caste tag. So these three come together. And why are people voting for them? In a dysfunctional system where almost nothing gets done, people are vexed about grievance redressal, about responsiveness of the administration. A gunda, a criminal in the garb of public office as an elected politician is sufficiently feared so that the bureaucracy moves at least to some extent. So people feel they are a better bet than the honest and honorable people who enter politics. So we are messing up the whole system, the political system, the economic system, the social system. And today it's more important than ever before because much of India's stability and order are not because of the Indian state. It's because of Indian society. We have a culture of tolerance. We have a God-fearing nature. Irrespective of your God, whichever be the religion, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Parsi, Sikh or Jain, or Buddhist, 99% of Indians are believers. They have faith. It is this fear of God, it is this faith that is keeping us on the straight and narrow path. And the social controls, what will my parents think? What will my neighbors think? What will my khandan think? But with increasing urbanization, these social controls are going to disappear. We are living in an atomized world, of impersonal world in urban India. And that's why you see increasing crime in urban India, because they are no longer afraid, they are no longer shamed into correct behavior. So unless the state really becomes effective and fair and swift in justice delivery, we'll have a lot of price to pay in the future, economically, socially, and politically. Unfortunately, we talk about rule of law. There are a number of committees appointed. I myself wrote the report along with my colleagues on the need to improve the police and justice system, how to structure it in a very detailed way in the Administrative Reforms Commission. But they're all gathering dust. We just talk. There are simple, practical answers. We need to go into them.
Right. So thank you for giving us a very lucid picture of why is the criminalization of politics and also the reforms needed. But I want to talk about two of those reforms. You talked about better recruitment, right? You talked about an all India judicial services. Now, no offense, sir, but we also have an all India services. We have the IAS and the IPS, but we also hear about a lot of corruption in the bureaucracy.
Absolutely.
So, what do you think an all India service in judiciary would be any different?
See, by whatever name you call any branch of bureaucracy or even judiciary or whatever service name you give, corruption is endemic unless you have systems of accountability. See, power tends to corrupt. It's human nature. Nobody can be trusted with power. So it's a failure of accountability. Now, if we say anybody in government is bound to be corrupt, therefore there shall be no government, it's nihilism. It doesn't solve the problem. We need a government. Only thing is government with straight and narrow functions. Not expansive government interfering in everything that we do in our lives, but limited government doing the necessary things for which there is no other substitute. And justice and crime investigation and dispute resolution are things for which government has no substitute. Government has to deliver. Therefore, we like it or not, we require a justice system. We require an independent crime investigation system. Now, why All India service? There's no special power or divine dispensation that will come automatically in All India service. And perhaps there is a case to say that we don't have to have monopoly for the All India services in the civil administration. I'm opposed to monopoly in civil administration. I'm supporting parallel recruitment. I want competition and choice, and I want key positions to be open to competitive recruitment. And I don't want lifelong tenure. I want people to be weeded out, etc., etc. But judiciary, it probably works better because somehow in India, rightly or wrongly, the society is enamored with All India services. The kind of competition you see, 14, 15 lakhs youngsters appearing for the All India services and central civil services in the country. No other country sees that kind of intense competition. So by definition, the brightest enter. Now, if they are not performing after they enter, it is a failure of the system to hold them to account.
Absolutely.
To ensure that better performance is there. But recruitment is not bad at all by any standard. So the expectation is that by giving that All India service aura, you get the best bright young lawyers become judges. But after that, unless under Article 235, High Court holds them to account effectively, and later on as higher court judges, we create a mechanism of accountability in the country. Right now, we don't have adequate mechanism because short of impeachment and removal, there's nothing else, and not a single judge in India's history has been removed by impeachment. So right now, the process has failed, and we have to address those challenges. But the recruitment quality itself will make sure that people of real competence and ability are in it. That is the reason why I'm asking for All India service. Not because I believe it's a divine dispensation.
Right. So, and second thing you talked about is local courts and summary proceedings. Now, as your work as part of the National Advisory Committee and also outside of it, you champion local courts, and we also have a Gram Nyayalaya Act, like you mentioned, I think about 2008. But since then, we don't see a reform happening. We don't see the implementation part happening. Where do you think we are lacking?
It's one of the instructive experiences of my life. Just because you have a law doesn't mean that things happen. Oftentimes reformers think we just got a law enacted and that's it. Yes, certainly some laws are required. Not too many laws, but some laws are required. But without political commitment, even when the law says there shall be local courts, if you look at the 2008 law, it says there shall be a local courts, at least one for every intermediate panchayat. For every block, there are about 5,000 blocks in the country. At least one means 5,000 at least local courts, maybe 10,000, 12,000. The idea is for every 50,000, 100,000 population, there will be a local court with summary procedures, etc. And the law is otherwise very well conceived, if you go into the detail. And with, as I said, complete authority for the high court so that the judicial independence is respected and impartiality is assured. So all precautions are taken. But there's no political will, there's no judicial will either.
Okay.
Neither the high courts, to be fair, nor the political executive took it very seriously. Despite the law saying there shall be. It's not an option. There shall be. It only shows that how the people in positions of authority in this country, how little they care for the law in itself. If we care so little for the law, then how do you expect the people to care for the law?
Right.
So I realized that while making laws is important, building public pressure to make the laws work actually is equally important.
Speaking about public pressure, sir, and this is what I want to end this conversation today with. Do you think we lack a genuine discussion on rule of law or to understand what is rule of law in the public domain?
You're absolutely right. No, as a culture, not only about rule of law, about education. We all know educational quality is substandard in a country where there's phenomenal demand for education. Every parent wants the child to see the child succeed. Healthcare. We all complain about healthcare outcomes. We all complain about the cost of healthcare, the billing problems, inadequate access, too many people dying prematurely, too many cases go undiagnosed. All these problems are known. Or rule of law, as you mentioned, or local amenities, your municipal services, what is happening to our local governments, urbanization, the chaos and the traffic. So we see problems everywhere. We refuse to look at solutions. Even when they stare us in the face, it's almost as if we rejoice in complaining, rejoice in wailing, rejoice in showing, using poetic language to show how terrible things are, rather than look at practical answers. Whether it's a societal problem or an intellectual failing, or of course governance failing is obvious. It's a matter of detail, but the broader point I'd like to make is many of these problems are simple, elegant, practical, affordable answers. And many countries have faced them. We are not the first human beings on earth. In our own country, in many pockets, many of these ideas have been implemented very successfully. So this is not throwing darts in the dark. These are based on evidence and logic. We can always adapt and improve. And unless we have an approach of problem solving rather than problem description and complaining and protest, I think we'll underperform. And India is in many ways underperforming. We deserve more. We can do much better. So rule of law is of course more complex. Rule of law also has an extra problem. Now there are entrenched interests which want to perpetuate status quo. If an elected politician locally is exercising control over the crime investigation branch, it's very difficult to let go. If a career bureaucrat has control over the whole police force, and if he is untrammeled by any kind of accountability, you can use them as your own instruments as you please. Law and order is one thing. Maintaining public order is one thing. But crime investigation is another. You have immense power and tremendous opportunity for corruption. So these two entrenched elements, the opportunities for corruption and the opportunity to control crime investigation, therefore become the modern day Maharaja without any kind of accountability or check on your power. These two are now entrenched. But the larger public interest, the voters' interests, are very clearly in favor of rule of law. And we require leadership that can articulate that aspiration and intelligently take this out. Now, what it means is that you have to give some, you have to take some. For instance, this is one of the few areas where I would like judiciary to play a more active role. I would very much like judges to be prosecutors, We already bring judges as law secretaries in many states, and they go back again. The idea is if judges are prosecutors, they go back again, they are career judges. And therefore, impartiality and judicial temperament is automatic in their decision making. In India, prosecution is incredibly weak. You go to any serious country with rule of law, a prosecutor is the one that is the fulcrum of criminal justice system. Have you heard of prosecutors in India seriously? Do you even know any names anywhere? Because they don't matter in most cases. This is just not right. It's just not right. But and similarly, in order to make the crime investigation wing completely accountable to the public and to the law, bring it under quasi-judicial control. Bring High Court judges, retired and others, to head a commission over the police to make sure that they no longer serve under the pressure of the executive branch of government. So there are ways where you have to have give and take. I am opposed to judiciary unnecessarily encouraging into every area and becoming executive. But this is one area where judiciary must be much more proactive given Indian conditions. So you have to have give and take. And you can't say, for instance, police can't say, I want a monolithic force, law and order, crime investigation, traffic control, VIP protection, and everything else under one umbrella, and then I want autonomy. Not possible. Law and order cannot be autonomous of the political executive. Law and order is a political function, just as it's a legal function. What kind of force you exert in a certain agitation is a political decision. Naxalites, you deal with them in one way. A communal right, you deal with it another way. A farmer's agitation, you deal with it a different way.
Yes.
A student's agitation in a different way. It's a political judgment. So no force on earth can make a democracy give up powers over law and order. But it does not mean you have powers over or you should have powers over crime investigation. They are two different things. So unless we examine the larger public interest, think of ourselves as citizens first, not as players in the state system, we will not find easy answers. But once we start thinking as citizens, what is most productive for us, I think the answers are self-evident because the whole world has done it.
Right, sir. Thank you for sharing your perspective today and assuring us that there is hope if we only look for it.